myself today. Last Friday I did a talk with James Dellingpole, which some of you might know, and some guy came up to me and gave me a drink, and another guy that James said he got a very bad feeling about gave him a drink, and we were both ill, and that was a week ago and I'm still ill. But you know, it sounds conspiratorial, it might just be coincidence. I'm doing another talk next month in Glastonbury with an Australian comedian called Steve Hughes, and we decided we'd title the talk Laughter is Medicine. And a friend of mine wrote to me and said, look, if laughter really is medicine, it'll have to be licensed, regulated, you need a prescription to get it. So probably lots of people may perhaps know what happened to me originally. Some 38 years ago, I took an antibiotic, which was a really stupid thing to do, and I became type 1 diabetic, and I became so rheumatoid arthritic that one morning I couldn't get out of bed. And then they put me in hospital for weeks, and the doctors said, look, there's nothing we can do, but we can make the pain more bearable. And at this point, I couldn't get dressed. But it'll involve drugs. And I said, well, look, you know, I'm not low on drugs. It was a drug that got me here in the first place. And after weeks reading and stuff, I figured out how to cure myself, and all my rheumatoid arthritis went away. So I became very interested in health at that point, and I started studying it. And then by whatever, the late 90s or something, the internet happened, and suddenly my dream came true. I could watch a computer screen all day and learn stuff. And I started learning things like how to stop colds. Now, I used to get colds and flus 2 or 3 times a year or whatever it was, and then suddenly I watched something, read something, I think Dr. Mercola, talking about vitamin D. I started taking vitamin D in winter, never got a cold ever again. And so I thought, well, that's sort of interesting. How much did the vitamin D cost? You know, £20 for an entire year's worth. So there's a lot of propaganda going around at the moment saying things like vitamin D are dangerous. And I have indeed come across somebody who overdosed on vitamin D. So it is very important, if you're going to supplement with D, that you should just, 20 quid, you can get a test device on eBay or somewhere, and you can test yourself a month after supplementing with it just to make sure you're not overdosing on the stuff. But that seems pretty rare. So a couple of years after I fixed myself, my dad's best friend got ill with cancer, and he was told to use vitamin C as a remedy. So he got cancer for the second time, and usually the second time is the one that might get you. And so he refused the drugs. He took my sort of approach of cutting out poisons, you know, don't poison yourself. And he took 35 grams of vitamin C every day in divided doses. And when he died 20 years later, it wasn't from cancer. The vitamin C, as far as one could see, had saved his life. Now, just for legal reasons, if I use the word cancer or cure, I'm spelling them with a K. Because if you spell it with C, you know, it's imprisonable, because only doctors can tell you that cancer could be reversed. It's something a little bit wrong. So, you know, when I was at school and growing up, I imagined that doctors knew about health. It's called a health service, and I assume that was one of the subjects they learned, you know. But of course it's not, as I think you probably all know. They don't do cures. They don't do causes, really. They don't look at the body as a machine that is on your side. They say, oh, your body's gone wrong. You know, it's gone wrong, but we can help you. We can fix you. We might not be able to cure you as such, but we'll probably be able to extend your life and so on. So they extend their life by 5 miserable years and then they die. But so I was interested in, well, what is the opposite of a doctor? And I probably, if I'd known there was an opportunity when I was very young at school, I would have wanted to become a herbalist. You know, people were suggesting accountancy and exciting jobs like that. But actually herbalism would have been probably a good option for me. But what I realized is that really almost everybody's low on the same stuff. Only a couple of years ago I found out in the Japanese language there isn't a word for menopause. You know, why is that? Because they eat so much iodine in all the seaweed that they eat with pretty much every meal and all the sea fish, that things like breast cancer with a K, menopausal issues just don't happen for them. So, say 150 years ago, if you went to the doctor and the doctor couldn't work, you were ill but the doctor didn't know why, the chances are they give you iodine. That would be the first thing, because iodine would balance out your temperature, and if your temperature's right, then basically you're running well. So so with iodine, 150 years ago, this was normal, and big doses. You know, they'd give you micrograms of it, you know, really quite a lot. But now doctors are taught that, then they would have given milligrams. Now doctors are taught that micrograms is what's necessary. And perhaps, strictly speaking, by some measurements, yes, micrograms are all you need, but milligram doses can reverse big issues. And so can I just ask a straw poll? Have any of you used Lugol's iodine? Okay, well, half the room, so this is good. Could you put your hand up if you got a positive result from it? Not quite as many, but some. So how much do people need to get benefits? Well, Dr. Brownstein, who wrote the book Iodine, Why You Need It and Why You Can't Live Without It, he reckoned that the Japanese on average eat 12.5 milligrams of iodine in food every day. So that's, you know, hundreds of times more than the doctors would suggest is right. So that's the equivalent of 2 drops of full strength Lugol's. Most people, I would say probably within a couple of weeks or so, often notice the difference. And usually the differences they notice is that dry skin tends to end, foggy thinking tends to clear, thyroid problems diminish, and menopausal issues like hot flushes go away. Now, they used to sell iodine in the chemists. You know, it cost £1. Then about, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, they banned it from chemists. You couldn't buy it anymore. Even though if you go for an operation in the hospital, one of the first things they're going to do before they cut you open is paint you with iodine, because no self-respecting pathogen can handle iodine. So if you've taken internally, then what? Well, the most iodine in the body is in the thyroids of both men and women. The second place in women that it resides is in the breasts. One of the reasons why the Japanese don't have the same issues that women do here. So with iodine, there's a mineral that goes with it, which is selenium. Now, selenium is a very interesting material because when I first heard about it, I heard that back in, I think, the 80s or 90s, they'd been doing experiments as to how to get people in New York off methadone. And there was a particular type of liquid selenium that actually did the trick better than anything else, so they banned that right away. Well, they didn't ban it, they just sort of hid the results, basically. So what happens if somebody's an addict, let's say they're an alcoholic or heroin addict or addicted to prescription drugs, if they stop, let's say, you know, an alcoholic stops, well, they get delirium tremors, DTs, the heroin addict stops and they've got heavy withdrawals and they think, oh, it's because I haven't got the alcohol, that's the problem. Turns out it's slightly different to that. Turns out, because your body is on your side, that if you're putting in a toxin, the body will create an antitoxin to help you deal with the toxin. So if you suddenly stop, the antitoxins, the body hasn't worked out that you've stopped, so the antitoxin is being made for a few days, hence the disastrous time that these people have when they try to give up. But this particular type of liquid selenium turns off the body's need to make antitoxins. So suddenly, coming off substances can be much, much easier than people have previously imagined. Now, you combine that with amino acids and all sorts of other things happen. I had a guy come to me I don't know, 7 years ago or something, and he was an alcoholic, and I knew why he was coming, and he could barely make it to my front door. And he said, you know, Clive, I don't really need to eat as such, because 4.5 bottles of white wine every night give me all the calories I need. This clearly wasn't true. And so at that point, I just learned about how amino acids can be useful in cases of addiction. So I'd read that for a very short time, a few days, giving people like a month's worth of amino acids in a day is how to do it. Nowadays, the amino acids that I use now, you'd only need a third of a month's worth. But anyway, so I gave him, all I had 7 bottles, and I gave him all seven bottles. I gave him a third of a bottle, it's just a powder, while he's with me, and then he goes home in the afternoon, takes some more, and in the evening takes some more, and he rings me up the next day and said, well, when I got home in the evening, I finally poured myself a glass of white wine as normal, but I didn't feel like it. And the same has been true with the selenium, that people have, you know, I believe you have to want to stop. You know, it's not necessarily going to work if you don't want to, because you can override all that. But he rings me out 8 days later. I've run out of amino acids, Clive, and I haven't got any more. I haven't had time to reorder. And he goes back on the booze and repeats this a few times. Each time is much less amino acids each time. And hopefully he's still off the booze, I don't know. But certainly for a couple of years he certainly was. So then there are other factors that are super important. You know, I think, as you all know, all of us are low on vitamins and minerals. We're all low on amino acids, and pretty much all of us are low on essential fats. And you know, as you know, the soils have been raped of their nutrition, and each year, you know, they grow the wheat. In the old days, they used to burn the stubble to the ground, which would put all the minerals back in the soil, but now they're not allowed to burn anymore, so they take that and dump them somewhere and put chemicals on instead. So most of the soils are so depleted, and when it comes to things like selenium, some parts of England, some parts of America, where, well, all over the world, where there actually isn't much selenium in the soil, certain areas. So, so one of the ways I found, I was studying with a K, cancer cures going on in China some 15, 20 years ago, and they talked about fulvic minerals. And fulvic minerals, humic and fulvic minerals, are in every soil everywhere. It's right under our feet right now. And there are certain places in the world where literally the concentrations of the stuff is so massive they can just mine it, filter water through it, and that's it. So we have a little bottle, about 50 ml, which lasts for 3 or 4 months, costs I think 40 quid or something like that. And I started sending off for fulvic minerals before I discovered this mine. And they kept on coming in big bottles and small bottles and all over, but nothing made a difference to me. And then one day, a little bottle came, stuff I sell now, and I woke up the next morning feeling different. It was really bizarre. My body felt a nicer place to be in. It was nice. And so the first one I gave it to was a friend of mine who was pregnant. She was getting morning sickness. 3 days later, she rings me up and said the morning sickness has stopped. Now, this isn't to say that it's a cure, but what it does seem to say is because we're meant to be running perfectly, that because we're low on some of these trace elements, that we put the trace elements back in and suddenly things can change. So in fulvic minerals, there's every nutrient known to man, basically. Everything that's ever lived or died has gone into the soil and somehow got condensed into this incredibly powerful material. And so because all of us pretty much are going to be low on nutrition, fulvic minerals is an interesting place to start, along with Celtic salt. Probably some of you may be using Celtic salt. You know, some people like Himalayan salt. My argument against that is that oceans aren't pink and don't live in the Himalayas. But Celtic salt tastes fantastic. It's very cheap. You buy it for 8 quid a kilo. And it's the maritime equivalent, you might say, of fulvic minerals. Fulvic minerals really are plant and animal based. whereas the salt is more sort of ground up rock based. But both are an incredibly good way to get minerals in very inexpensively. What basically cured my rheumatoid arthritis. Oh yeah, good point. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. What basically cured my rheumatoid arthritis was magnesium. That was number one. And magnesium is, generally speaking, the answer to pain generally. Magnesium, as probably most of you know, allows your body to relax. And in that relaxed state, pain can go away. You know, muscles and tendons can relax. The whole thing can, your whole body can soften up. And, you know, a lot of people have calcifications around their body. And what dissolves calcium? Well, magnesium does that. What makes your body go a more healthy alkaline state? Magnesium does that. So magnesium calms your heart down. So people with arrhythmia, they may well find they're low on magnesium. People with atrial fibrillation may well find that this is the case also, that they're low on iodine. Iodine is absolutely crucial. All your hormones are made from iodine. So what else will magnesium do? I had this woman ring me up, I don't know, a year or so ago now, and her story was horrible. She'd had the most ghastly life ever, and she said she was suicidal. What should she do? So I told her in divided doses to take 12 magnesium capsules that day and 12 the next day. And she rings me up at 8 in the evening, second day, and says, well, I'm no longer suicidal. Magnesium. Magnesium is incredible. Magnesium is often why epileptics have an epileptic fit. You might find that most people who are depressed are low on magnesium. People who are in danger of having heart attacks, what do? If somebody's having a heart attack, they rush you into the emergency room. Well, they'll probably inject you intramuscularly with magnesium. If they know that's what to do, they might use bicarbonate of soda, which is another incredible emergency medicine. I'm just reading a book at the moment by Dr. Mark Serkis about sodium bicarbonate, and I can really recommend the book. Sodium bicarbonate is you know, we make bicarb in our bodies. You know, after we've created the stomach acid, the next step down is bicarbonate production. And as we get older, most people aren't making the bicarbonate they should. And so knowing how to use this is very important. Let's say you've just eaten a meal. Should you take some after a meal? Absolutely not, because bicarbonate is alkaline, it will neutralize any stomach acid. So if you took bicarb within a couple of hours of eating, you're just going to waste that food. It's going to be neutralized too early. But if let's say you took half a teaspoon before you went to bed, what would that do? Well, that would keep you alkaline all night. And you know, for many people, the pH is a factor that they might find interesting. People don't know that pH stands for potential hydrogen. So another book I've been reading recently is about methylene blue, called The Ultimate Guide to Methylene Blue by Mark Sloan. Super interesting book. Methylene blue was discovered, I don't know, 150 years ago as a blue dye. And then people were using it when microscopy started. They wanted to see if they could use it as a blue dye stain for microscope slides. But they found that any live pathogen that they looked at immediately died. And some people who keep tropical fish might have come across methylene blue as they put a couple of drops in a fish tank to stop fungal infections, damaging the fish. Anyway, by about 1896 or something, they discovered that it was fixing malaria. And many people would say that even now, methylene blue is probably the ultimate remedy for malaria. So what will methylene blue do? Well, it's most known probably as a nootropic, to wake your brain up, to make you think clearer, faster. So they're using it with Alzheimer's, dementia. They've had interesting results right across the board with I was actually going to mention a subject there, which you're probably aware of, which begins with an A and all ends in tism, and children tend to get it. And so it's been useful there, as are a lot of things. You know, doctors are taught that the tism thing is incurable. The reason I'm reluctant even to mention the word is the various death threats and bomb threats I've had each time I've actually talked about it seriously. It got a bit heavy at one point, and various people in that area are actually getting killed. There are a whole number of people working with GC-MAF. Do any of you know about GC-MAF? A few people. Well, what happened was that a wonderful guy, really quite a hero, David Noakes, he worked together with an Italian medical doctor called Marco Ruggiero, and Marco created the substance GC-MAF. GC-MAF is something we make in our body. It's a macrophage activating factor. Anyway, they started making it, and David was wealthy enough to decide to start giving it away. He lived on the island of Guernsey, and he put an advert in the newspaper saying anybody currently in hospital with a big C might want to contact him, and he'd give them some free medicines. So he started doing that, and obviously that ruffled the authorities somewhat. I invited him 12-ish years ago to a talk that I was giving as a sort of guest of honor, and he said, look, we're reversing 80% of the C word and 80% of the A word, roughly. Anyway, we were filming it, and I said, look, David, if you put this out, you're going to end up in trouble. And he said, well, it's too late now. I've already said this publicly before. It's fine. So anyway, he did jail time in 2 different countries. Victimless crime. There were no victims. And the UK government came along and stole all the production. They took the lot, stole it, broke him physically, mentally. I would say he's pretty much a broken man. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. And his partner, she got sent to jail as well, and they came out destroyed. Anyway, so there's an awful lot of kickback going around. They don't want us free, obviously, and I think the way forward is to start locally and changing everything. I think we need to vote out the councils locally and vote in our own councils. How many of you know about the Bradbury Pound? Yeah, pretty much all of you. So if you don't know about the Bradbury Pound, look up Bradbury Pound and you'll find out that the government have the remedy to cure the economic woes of this country totally overnight, because they've done it before in 1914 when they thought the banks were going to crash. There was going to be a bank run because the money wasn't there. So over the years, I reckon that the answers to everything are actually out there. You know, over the years, people have looked at the problems. Yes, they've got worse, but they're still basically the same problems. Tyranny, and we can do it ourselves. And I think it's a bit of a belief thing. Can we do it? Because the monster seems so huge. But I think we can. How long it'll take, I'm not sure. So, forgive me 1 second. I have just got to see if I'm still alive or not. This is my fabulous Freestyle Libra 2. This tells me my blood sugar, and yeah, I'm fine. And so, has anybody got a question they'd like to ask me? Yeah.
You mentioned...
Just speak as loud as you can.
You mentioned methylene blue as being one of the best possible cures for malaria. What's your view of chlorine dioxide as well?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a very good question. You know, they're both oxidants as opposed to antioxidants. So MMS, sodium chloride with an acid like lemon juice, creating chlorine dioxide, is an incredible remedy for malaria. That was how it was first discovered to work. Chlorine dioxide would be my ultimate go-to if nothing else had worked. I started taking it about 15 years ago, and I got up to about 16 drops of the stuff and felt terrible. And now the instructions are take 1 drop. At that point, it was go up to 60 drops. So 1 drop at a time can be very, very effective for almost anything. So again, this is one of the big kickbacks. People have been really hammered for talking about chlorine dioxide. And it's very hard to get now, except that you can buy it in camping shops. It's, there are various different materials they use for water purification. And if you look for, it'll either say chlorine dioxide or it'll say sodium chlorite, not chloride like salt chlorite. And it's worth knowing about. And you basically get 2 little bottles. There's a company, I think it might be called Life Force, who sell it online or were. And yeah, it's like hydrogen peroxide, for instance, incredibly inexpensive way of getting people well. There's a little booklet called The $1 Cancer Cure with a K, and that's all about hydrogen peroxide and what you can do with that. And I've used hydrogen peroxide in a number of cases. For instance, I had, people get blocked ears, right, full of wax. If you put a couple of drops of 3% hydrogen peroxide in the ears, or 2%, not more, it just bubbles away and the ear tubes can get cleared. It's quite remarkable. Let's talk about something else for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about the poisoning that everybody's got. So we've all been breathing, bathing, drinking, and I think one of the first toxins to be aware of, that probably hopefully all of you are dealing with, is chlorine. Now, I did a video a month or 2 ago where I got 3 glasses of water from the tap, so chlorinated water, and I got some swimming pool pH indicator drops, chlorine indicator drops. Put a couple of drops in, first glass goes green. So the second glass, I put my fingers in the glass, swirl it around for 5 seconds, put the chlorine indicator drops in, it doesn't go green. Where's the chlorine gone? The next glass, I got a piece of raw potato, stirred it around for 5 seconds, put the chlorine indicator drops in, no chlorine. So my assumption is that the chlorine went into my fingers and the chlorine went into the potato. So if you're having a bath in chlorinated water, where's the chlorine going? And chlorine was a poison gas in World War I. You know, should we be filtering all the water that we're cooking in, making drinks with, bathing in? Well, yes, unfortunately, yes. And so it's not obviously just the chlorine. When I moved into my current place, I rang up the water supplier and said, well, where does my water come from? And they said, oh, well, you're very lucky. Yes, we put chlorine in it. Yes, we put aluminium sulfate in it to flocculate the water, which means making it clear. But it's absolutely fine, because I asked them, has it been through a sewage processing plant, yes or no? Now, if you're living in a city, or you might be unlucky, the water you're drinking may be second-hand. And they can filter out the big lumps. You might be interested to know what they do in the sewage works. They separate everything, so they separate the fats, which they sell to the soap industry. It's called soapification. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. Only buy good materials to put on your body. I've stopped using shampoo altogether, because while there are regulations for certain things, organic means organic. I'm told with cosmetics, organic doesn't mean organic, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. So what's the most sold drug out there? Well, the birth control pill. So if you are drinking recycled water, you're going to be getting that. Maybe that might explain some of the gender confusion that seems to be going on with the 57 varieties of gender out there. So on top of that, there are the antibiotics, and that's what wiped me out. And obviously all the other drugs. So in my house, I've got a reverse osmosis system, and yeah, they're going to cost you maybe 500 quid or something, but that seemed, to me, it seemed the sensible way to go. But you can get proper big filters in line to do the job, but RO, The only problem with RO is it comes out, if you like, dead and a bit empty. So you might, I tend to put some fulvic minerals if I'm drinking just water, or I might put a pinch of salt or some lemon juice or something to try and bring it back to life. But it's pretty serious. Chlorine knocks out the thyroid. The whole reason that most people are low on iodine is because of the chlorine in the water. And then there's the government who want fire retardants sprayed on all your bedding and furniture and stuff. So that's bromine, salts of bromine usually. So that knocks out your iodine and the thyroid. Then there's a fluoride. I'm sure you all are not using fluoride toothpaste because that would be killing yourself basically slowly. So you might be interested to know how fluoride was first discovered by the Americans. What was happening was that the Soviet Union were ordering lots and lots of fluoride, and the Americans couldn't work out why. They thought maybe they're making some new type of bomb with it or something. But it turned out they were using it in the gulags to dumb the prisoners down. They didn't need nearly so many guards if they gave them fluoride. So it explains why they want to fluoridate half the country. They want you dumbed down. Okay, so other toxins. So some people get brown marks as they get older on their hands, which is sort of build-up of rancid fats and waxes. Now, selenium can often get rid of that, but we've got a couple of products which we're introducing at the moment, which I've known about for some years, and I've done lots of interviews about them, which are suppository-based in some cases, in some cases a delicious liquid. Actually, it does taste nice. And you can get out the toxic poisonings that are resistant to, that just don't want to come out. So there's so many toxins now in the food industry and in the air and all the pollutants that your body doesn't know how to get rid of. So a lot of them get stuck. And so if you feel that you need to do a serious detox and where other things haven't worked, let's say vitamin C hasn't worked, maybe MSM sulfur hasn't worked, fulvic minerals haven't worked, then there's some new products. There's one called albendextrin, which, so many wonderful products. It's hard to know where to start. Let's take another question. Maybe somebody on this side. Yes.
Yeah, you talked earlier about iodine and everything, but what if the person has been taking levothyroxine for a length of time? How can it be taking Lugo's iodine counteract the effect of the pharmaceutical effects of the levothyroxine?
Well, okay, very good question. So levothyroxine is the drug of choice for the doctors if somebody comes with a thyroid problem, and they'll tell the person, well, you're going to be on this through the rest of your life. Let's find the right dose and we'll just keep you at that level. Now, in the old days, that obviously before levothyroxine, the doctors would have given iodine. That would have been probably the solution to the thyroid problem in the first place. And if that didn't work, they'd give them an extract of of a thyroid hormone from an animal. Cows, pigs were the choice animals. Because in an animal-based thyroid compound, you have all the thyroid hormones, whereas levothyroxine is just one hormone that the body actually has to convert into something more useful. So if you start taking iodine when you're taking levothyroxine, the first thing to do would be to see how you feel. Build up slowly, perhaps try one drop and build up, and be aware you might need to reduce your levothyroxine to nothing. That is a possibility. But anybody on levothyroxine, I would suggest they research taking an animal-based tablet instead. And there's a website called stopthethyroidmadness.com, which says it quite well. Which explains quite a lot about this subject. And, because what I say, some people think it's a tiny bit controversial sometimes, usually the authority figures, they took me off YouTube in 2014, which I thought was a bit early. And The government Quango took me down. I was working with UK Column at the time. They took them down and a few other people, and they said I was being too television-like, making Skype conversations that were pretty bad quality. So at that point, I suddenly thought, well, look, I've got, well, I don't know, 400 videos out there. I'm going to start a private members club where people can join the club and get around the censorship. Because, as you know, a private members club, you can sort of do what you like because you've stepped out of their society. So I started a thing which I called secrethealthclub.com, where I put all the videos and articles and so on that they don't want you to know about. And so that's now 10 years old or something. Can't even add. 8, 9 years old. And yeah, so if you want to get information as an A to Z, reasonably easy to find basis, then joining the Secret Health Club is one way to go. And to get back on YouTube, they took me down again, obviously, when I first started mentioning vitamin C and the little problem that's been around for the last 3 years. Okay, anybody got another question? That lady there.
You do that with iodine, and also if you're taking magnesium, do you need to take something else to get it to the place it needs to be?
Okay, so you can overdose on anything. You can drown in water, dangerous stuff, you've got to avoid it. Magnesium and vitamin C anyway, are generally rather good because they're self-regulating. The body, if you take too much vitamin C at one time, or too much over a whole day, the body says that's enough and you get diarrhea. Same with magnesium, the body will self-regulate. And while overdose, nobody's ever died of a vitamin. Bear in mind that vitamin D isn't a vitamin, it's a hormone. It got mislabeled back in the day. So vitamins never killed anybody, which is quite good news, because people say, oh dear, 12 magnesiums, is that going to kill me? Well, actually, no, it's unlikely. You can obviously overdose on minerals, but it's not hard to find out the information to get it right. And the question is, who are you going to buy the stuff from? The average high street shop. Holland & Barrett used to be owned by the Carlyle Group. They make bombs. I'm sure they're nice people, really. So, if you're buying supplements from a supermarket, are you doing yourself any favors, or are you actually doing yourself harm? And things like, the press, they will say, oh, if you're pregnant, you need folic acid. Okay, folic acid is synthetic. Not that I'm entirely against synthetic, but it is synthetic as opposed to folates, which are natural. Now, there are a lot of people who are allergic to folic acid. So is that when you want to give, do you want to give a not as good version, or do you want the proper version? So, so knowing the source where you're buying it from. My dad used to have a poster up above his desk at work which said, "My tastes are simple, I just like the best." And he basically, his principle was, the best lasts the longest, it's the most sensible in the long run, buy the best and it's going to serve you well. And I sort of followed that dictum, really. My ego is way too big for failure. So, if somebody is going to take my supplements, for instance, I want them to have a really, really good result. So, years ago, a family member committed suicide. They said that they were manic depressive, and I now know what I should have said to this person. This was decades ago, and I said niacin. I should have said niacin, vitamin B3. So niacin is incredibly interesting B vitamin. The guy who started Alcoholics Anonymous, he wanted to make niacin the 13th step. Niacin can reverse schizophrenia, manic depression, whole host of neurological issues. It's massive, but you've got to know how to use it. So one of the best ways to find out how to use things is to get it wrong. So the first time I tried niacin, I took 20 times too much by accident, and I had to go out, so I jumped in the car, and I realised halfway up the road that I was having a heart attack and was going to die. Luckily, there was a handy lay-by to die in, and then I remembered I'd taken the niacin. Then I remembered that, it gives you a flush, and I'd got a flush so bad I was purple. And anyway, but there are two types of niacin, luckily, basically. There's a type that gives you a flush, which is pure niacin. Then there's a type that doesn't give you a flush. And so most of the time, you don't need the flushing version. However, if somebody's got a cholesterol problem, the first clinical trial to show how to remedy cholesterol imbalance was with niacin and a couple of additional things like vitamin C. So you need the flushing version. But for all the neurological issues, you don't need the flushing version. The non-flushing version will work. And on my site, I've got one that's got two types of non-flushing and a tiny bit of the flushing type. So the mixture is good. So if you know anybody who has got some sort of serious depression going on, some sort of neurological issue, you want to look at the work of Abraham Hoffer or look at the Secret Health Club and learn how to use the niacin. So the version that we have, each capsule has about 500 milligrams. Now, for Abraham Hoffer, for his type of cure, often people had to get up to 3 grams, which would be 6 capsules. And so one just starts slowly, and now for some people that may be way too much. So it's one of these things that while it's very, very safe, the more you study it, the better. And if somebody's got a serious problem, then studying it is obviously very, very important. So niacin is super interesting, and all sorts of other effects. Let's take another question. Yes.
You've mentioned methylene blue for Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And fluoride. What else would you recommend?
Okay, so what would I recommend for Alzheimer's? Now, the first time I got a Alzheimer's result, you might say, was I gave a talk about 15 years ago or so, and I said, look, anybody got it, somebody with dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever, and this person said, yeah, Mum, and she said, what should I do? So I suggested 6 tablespoonfuls of coconut oil on a daily basis. Now, as you probably know, your brain is basically made of water and fat, and of that fat is cholesterol. Your brain is made of cholesterol, so all those people in the past who followed the low cholesterol, low fat lie are the ones that are now got Swiss cheese for brains. So I got a phone call some weeks later from this woman. She said, well, guess what happened? She said, 2 years ago, I had to stop talking to Mum on the phone because it was just too difficult. It couldn't have a conversation anymore. But now, she said, I wasn't able to get 6 tablespoonfuls in, but I did get 4 tablespoonfuls in. And now I'm speaking to Mum on the phone a few weeks later like I was 2 years prior. So for some people, it's a lack of natural fat. So anybody that you know who's not eating cream and butter and fatty meat and fatty fish and so on, they may perhaps need to consider that. Coconut oil is a reasonably good vegan alternative. Other things, well, all the minerals, iodine for sure. Pretty much anything we've discussed might work. There's a great book by a guy called Dale Bredesen, who is a medical doctor specialised in this, and that book is all about Alzheimer's. Dale Bredesen, and you can see things online with him explaining how he's reversed it. So there are things that can be done. Let's take another question.
Piggybacking on the previous question, with magnesium, do you need CalMag, like calcium, to assimilate the magnesium better in the system? need to be a catalyst?
Well, in my opinion, no. Doctors believe that if you take magnesium, you need calcium, or a lot of them might believe that, but most of us have got too much calcium. And essentially, apart from a few very rare cases, I never recommend calcium as a supplement. You know, if you're eating leafy vegetables, you're going to get calcium, dairy products, and many ways to get calcium. But it's magnesium that we're all low on. You know, stress burns up magnesium, and I would suggest all of us in life are way more stressed than would be natural. And so to protect ourselves against that stress, the body just burns up the magnesium. But once all the magnesium is gone, then things like anxiety and worry, depression, pain, stuff starts to happen. Restless leg, muscle cramps, hiccups, twitches around the eyes, all magnesium deficiencies. So calcium, I would say generally not, but everybody pretty much is low on magnesium. Pretty much everyone in this room is probably low on it. It's just a fact of life right now. Yes?
Allopurin, what's your take on that? Is there a natural substitute that's maybe better for it?
Say it again.
Allopurin.
I don't know what that is.
They give it to you for gout and things like that.
Oh, okay. So people who've got gout, generally it's a pH issue. Classic remedies are things like, if I remember this rightly, black cherry, natural black cherry and cranberry. So, you know, I can't give you drug supplements because I don't know what they are. But you know, gout has been around for centuries and usually is pretty easily cured. There's a wonderful website out there called earthclinic.com. And if you were to look up gout there would be hundreds of people who would have written into it and saying, I cured my gout with this. So everybody's a bit different, so you know, that would be a great research site to go to. So, have another question? Right at the back.
Is magnesium oil better than taking it internally?
Okay, is magnesium oil better than taking the capsules? Well, magnesium oil is fantastic. It's just a concentrated liquid of magnesium chloride. And for some people who've got aches and pains and stuff, rubbing it in can be a way to get magnesium right to the spot. But if somebody's got a serious pain, they might want to have to rub it in just at the beginning, first few days, every hour or something. And it's a bit sticky and, you know, it's a bit boring. You can have a bath and stuff. You know, people traditionally, when doctors recommended what you should do, they might say, go and take the sea air, or they're going to say, take the mountain air, or go to a spa and relax in the healing waters, there were sulfur baths, but most of them were magnesium baths, and people would hobble in, hang around the magnesium bath for a week or so on holiday and feel much, much better, and the pain would have gone. Personally, because of the stickiness mainly, I take capsules myself, and some days I might take 4, some days I might take 8. That's what suits me, because if I don't take magnesium, I get muscle cramps. I wake up in the morning and stretch, and ow. Other people, their heart might beat out of rhythm. You know, all sorts of things can happen. But yeah, I prefer the magnesium as capsules, personally, just because it's so much easier to take. Another question? Yes?
What do you recommend as a parasite cleanse?
Okay, well, it's interesting, the whole parasite thing. What did our ancestors do in the past? Because it used to be normal that once a year you would do a parasite cleanse for the whole family and the animals. That was a common thing that used to happen. Now, of course, it doesn't. So in the old days, they often used bitter herbs to do it. You know, all sorts of bitter herbs that people look on as weeds are very good. I mean, you know, dandelion, rocket, stinging nettle, all sorts of things. So I interviewed this wonderful medical doctor some years ago called Dr. Jennifer Daniels, and she is a black lady, very bright, came out of Harvard and Wharton, and she went to work as a doctor in the ghetto, as she put it, and she had no white clients at all, they were all black. And over the first year, before she came totally disillusioned with being a doctor and stopped, various of her clients would say, look, did you know that the slaves had a cure for almost everything back in the day? Anyway, it turned out to be turpentine, right? Turpentine. And now they would have banned turpentine years ago, but artists insist on it. So you can still get pure gum spirits of turpentine. And some people rub it on their skin and it will get rid of parasites. There's the Trojan horse method of using it. You need to study this before you do it, which is getting a lump of sugar or a couple of lumps of sugar, putting turpentine on it, and it's like a Trojan horse. The parasites come out, eat the sugar and get killed by the turpentine. But there are many, many other ways to do it. The doctors would give you, or the vets and doctors would give you things like fenbendazole, albendazole, all the drugs that end in albendazole, basically. And people have found that they've cured their cancer with a K, all sorts of things. You know, how many of us have got parasites and how important it is, I would say probably all of us have. So what do? Well, I do a number of things. I use a Tesla frequency device from 100 years ago, and I can use that on the inside of my wrists, and that would kill parasites if they're bloodborne. I have a little laser, which is like a wristwatch, which fits on the inside of the wrist, and I use that every now and then for half an hour. And again, if there's any bloodborne parasites, the red lasers will almost certainly wipe them out. Iodine is going to be pretty effective for wiping out any parasites. You know, every, whatever it is, 15, 20 minutes, all the blood in the body goes through the thyroid. Now, if the thyroid is full of iodine, iodine kills pathogens. So again, if it's bloodborne, if you've got enough iodine, you should wipe out bacteria, all the things that make us ill. Your thyroid is one of the organs made to protect us. So another reason to have enough iodine. Now, you know, there are many parasites which are maybe in the blood, but also have buried themselves in the brain or in the tissues. And there are a number of other materials that can be used. And again, if anybody wants to join the Secret Health Club, there is a whole section on, you know, detoxification and parasites, and we do a couple of suppositories. I'm not sure if they're on my site yet, but we've got one specifically that does that. You know, the suppository route is an interesting way to go. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you're French, you'd love it. Okay, at the back, standing up.
Is there anything that I can take to kind of minimise that damage? Because I've had them for years and years and years, and I can't currently afford to get them.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, it's probably, how much does it cost to remove an amalgam filling? Probably a couple of £100 or something. Okay. Well, you could sue the dentist who put them in and get the money that way. Okay. So, I mean, mercury fillings are an issue. I would suggest brush your teeth less, because, you know, what happens with an atom of mercury, it comes out and it kills the first human cell it meets, and the next, and it isn't diminished. So is brushing your teeth too hard going to rub off mercury? Well, don't know, but things that will detoxify mercury, selenium probably is number one, particularly the liquid one. Vitamin C, fulvic minerals, MSM sulfur, I'm fairly sure would do it. Sorry, arming and ahhing. Send me an email and I'll send you a link because my brain's not working that well right now. Okay, another question. Yes?
What's the recommended daily intake of all the vitamins that you've got? What do you recommend just as daily well-being?
Okay. I mean, firstly, eat your way to it, because I used to have an organic farm years ago out in Spain, and while I'd gone from desperately ill to better, when I was on the organic farm, I didn't have any need for any supplement whatsoever, because I was eating well. Simple as that. Before I answer how much of each one, let me just say that one of the stories that I really liked was how a woman riding a beautiful horse carrying a baby knocks on your front door and says, look, would you mind looking after the baby and the horse? The horse is a champion racehorse worth 40 million quid. The baby's arguably more valuable than that. And they're both hungry. I've just got to go. Just look after the horse and the baby. So what foods would both baby and horse be happy with? Oats, maybe, avocados, carrots, cucumbers. They probably nibble away on those happily enough. So how much poison shall we put in the baby's food? How much poison should we put in the horse's food? Well, clearly the answer is none. But each time you go to the shops and you buy something that has got a preservative in it, that's got any sort of chemical thing that you probably don't recognize on the label, if it's not organic, if it's not being grown naturally, you're poisoning yourself and poisoning the family. And that's a really good place to start, because we have to either grow it ourselves or whatever it takes. It's super important. We've got to stop the evil empire poisoning us by not buying the stuff. So, okay, how much of each? Well, for myself, I've mentioned that I take quite a few magnesium every day. Every maybe 10 days, I'll maybe take 10 drops of iodine, maybe. Same, I might take a squirt of selenium every 10 days, maybe, I don't know, 6 drops, maybe a bit more. I use fulvic minerals most days in water. Vitamin C, I might take half a teaspoonful, maybe twice a day, maybe quarter of a teaspoonful, maybe twice a day. But with vitamin C, it's one of those things where the iller you are, the more you need. And most humans probably only need like 5-10 grams of vitamin C, which you might get from healthy foods, maybe. Say 5 grams, maybe. But I've seen people who've needed 200 grams in 24 hours intravenously, as well as all combination, because they were about to die the next day. So the iller you are, the more vitamin C you need. So there's this famous thing called bowel tolerance, which is you find out how much vitamin C you can safely take. Let's say a quarter of a teaspoonful, half a teaspoonful. Some people will automatically get a stomach upset with that much, but just a little bit of experiment. And then if you're ill, you've got, let's say, some infection or something, try taking it every hour, or every half an hour, or every 15 minutes. There's an incredible 4-minute video called Reverse Pneumonia in 3 hours, where Dr. Andrew Saul gets bacterial pneumonia, and he takes 2 grams, it's about half a teaspoonful, every 6 minutes, and 3 hours later his pneumonia stopped, right? He then explains how he gave 20 grams to a 20-pound baby in one day, and that the illness that the baby had also stopped. Now, I'm not saying this is what you do. I'm saying learn from Dr. Andrew Saul, who's written some incredible books on vitamin C and various vitamins and minerals as a way to maintain and restore your health. Okay, another question at the back. David.
You mentioned putting a pinch of salt in zeroed out water, distilled water. Well, recently you had Ian Clark on one of your programs, and he talked about like industrial quantities of salt, like a lot more than a pinch. And I'm wondering how much salt you would recommend to go with the vinegar that I need for the salt and vinegar on the chip on my shoulder. Because I have upped my quantities substantially, so what's the latest as far as you're concerned?
Okay, I mean, I feel that our taste buds are a reasonably good judge of how much salt we like and how much we need. I'm pretty generous with Celtic salt. I'd never use free running table salt in a million years. It's poisonous. recently I heard something from Dr. Eric Berg, who said that if you're getting up to have a pee at night, try taking a potassium citrate tablet and half a teaspoonful of good quality sea salt like Celtic salt in water. So I would suggest experiment. I can't be definitive as to how much everybody needs, and I think our absorption rates are always different and so on. But I wouldn't be scared of good quality salt. Yes, the gentleman with the beard.
What's your take on chronic fatigue and why so many people are getting it, it appears, and how to avoid that?
Okay, so it turns out that research has shown that almost everybody with chronic fatigue is low on selenium. I'm sure they're going to be low on other things as well, but that one is at the, at the front of sort of research that I've read recently. But if you're low on one material, the whole body can feel crap. And I just did a hair mineral analysis. And any of you ever done a hair mineral analysis? Okay, a couple of people. So I was shocked. I thought that I knew what I was doing, but I had the hair mineral analysis. I was way off the charts on copper, incredibly high on copper, and incredibly high on calcium, which was really weird. And anyway, I had an analysis of my hair mineral analysis done by the lady who runs the organization. And she said, well, actually, you're low on iron. And actually, the reason for the high copper, high calcium, in my case, was that it was actually low iron that was the real root of those two imbalances. And it'd been really funny because I've been craving black pudding and beef. So anyway, hair mineral analysis can be very useful. I wasn't looking for anything, if you like, but I certainly found it. So you might find that doing a hair mineral analysis, it won't tell you where you are today, but it will show the last 2 or 3 months of where you've been. And it might show up something like selenium being very low or some other mineral. B vitamins, anybody who's low on energy, anybody with chronic fatigue, B vitamins are the first things to look for. And we're in the process of bringing out a new multi-B. It's all about energy. You can have your B12 levels looked at. For some people, B12 is the answer. So yeah, B vitamins for energy. You had a question at the front.
I was just wondering whether you've ever come across a solution for plastic anemia, which is what That's tricky, isn't it?
I can't give you an intelligent answer on that one. But you can contact me later and I'll try and help figure it out. Yes.
For those who distill their water, it is said that all minerals are extracted by the distilling process. I read something or heard something the other day which said that only the inorganic minerals are removed and the organic minerals remain. What is the difference? Is this true?
No, I think what's being said there is that if you drink distilled water that's empty, it will just pull out the mineral salts that aren't wanted by the body and leave the good ones. And as far as I'm aware, it's a theory and I don't know. Rainwater, if the skies were clear, would be distilled water. So that seems a very sensible thing to drink. So because I'm uncertain as to the right and wrong of distilled water, sometimes if I decide, I know I'm going to detox myself, I'll drink just pure distilled water, because water is the ultimate solvent, so it is going to pull stuff out. The arguments whether it's negatively charged or positively charged. So I don't really know, but generally speaking, I feel comfortable bringing the water back to life. And it gets some salt into me and more minerals, which I think is a good thing. The lady there.
What would you suggest for someone suffering from vertigo or Meniere's, one of those things that are difficult to diagnose?
Okay, I think the first one is vitamin B1. thiamine, and very, very interesting vitamin B1. It might have something to do with iodine deficiency. What are the other sort of symptoms?
It's actually for my brother, who's just generally dizzy. When he's walking around, he's fine seated or lying down.
And his blood pressure's all right?
I assume so. He has been to the doctor.
Yeah, and survived, that's good. Yeah, have him look at B1, vitamin B1, and probably take that along with a B supplement, which is a multi-B. Yeah, he'll be able to research that online. Yes?
I can't sleep. I'm asking for a friend. I can't sleep very well. Is that too general? Sorry.
Well, you know, there's so many things that could be causing a lack of sleep. It could be anything from a 5G tower on their roof to having the mobile phone by their ear switched on, having a light, a little red light flashing. It might be the internet, the router that's keeping them awake. It might be eating too late at night. It might be watching TV too late at night, having bright lights too late at night. Maybe like a magnesium. Lots of possibilities there. But, the gentleman at the back. Yes, you.
Have you seen any work by Professor Exley with regard to the aluminium toxicity in the brain, fatty globules, and Fijian water, iron silicates, chemical weathering?
Yeah, I've heard him talk at a conference, and last time he gave me a bottle of very expensive water as the solution. I just don't feel entirely confident with that. I was using horsetail, but he believes that horsetail isn't the right remedy to get your silica. It's other ways. So I can't really comment. He's the expert, not me, on that one. But I'd be using all the things I've mentioned. Lady there, yeah.
Somebody struggling with benign prostate aplasia or inflamed prostate?
Okay. Zinc and selenium tend to be the two minerals that people with prostate issues seem to be lacking. There's a classic remedy of saw palmetto, a herb. What would they have done in the old days? Well, 100 years ago, they probably might have used a frequency device. You know, Tesla invented the frequency device that I use, which was 1891 to 1893. He was developing that and showing it. And there's a prostate electrode, you just shove it up your bum. Because there are the occasional sparks, farting is not permitted. But I mean, seriously, that's what they did. And back in the day, you know, if people had a vaginal disease or something embarrassing, for instance, they didn't want to go to the doctor because the doctor might tell everybody in the village. You know, people used to buy these devices. You know, dentists used them as anesthetic devices. They were super common with doctors. You know, right up until the Second World War, you know, they were teaching doctors about electrotherapy. You know, I've got medical books going way back when, because, you know, Guy's Hospital in London, they started their electrotherapy department in 1843. 1843, they were using electricity. John Wesley, the guy who built the Wesleyan chapels, 100 years before, he was using primitive battery technology to get people well with electricity. So the machines I use, you know, 100 years old, restored, but they still work. They're not, unlike, if you don't abuse them, they're not likely to go wrong. And you can treat almost anything. In, let's say the last year, I had one woman who'd been in the eye hospital for 3 days, and they'd given her all the drugs, all the drops, everything. And she had an inflammation inside the eye, and they said, well, you're probably going to lose the eye, but if we give you steroids for 6 months and antibiotics for 6 months, we may well be able to save your eye. She came over to my house, borrowed a machine, and by using it 15 seconds 6 times in the evening, and then a couple more 15 seconds, couple more in the morning, she told me it was 80% better, and I've got a video online of her saying this. What else has happened? I had somebody yesterday, actually. I'm just putting out the video today, hopefully. This guy who came, somebody had shot him with a dart. I don't know whether you've seen those. It's quite heavy darts that children can throw at each other and take their eyes out. And it had just hit him on the back of the leg about 10 days before, and somehow it must have damaged some nerve. I have no idea what, but he could barely walk. Anyway, he tried everything, and he was also a practitioner and had loads of tools at his disposal, couldn't fix it. I gave him the machine to use on himself. 5 minutes later, completely fixed, pain totally gone. On the Secret Health Club, you'll see videos where I get 34 people out of pain in a row in less than 5 minutes with each one, with a 100-year-old piece of kit. So I have brought a couple with me, and tomorrow I'll be doing some treatments, or Sunday. Some people can find me, and I'll set up somewhere in one of the tents that has electricity, and anybody who needs treating, they can be treated. Yes?
The Tesla machine, is it like the Zapper, similar? No?
No,
Okay.
no.
And for our friends that have been given the thing in the arm, would you suggest that they use something like, is there anything they can do?
The Tesla devices, whether they'd work for the arm thing, I've absolutely no idea. I just don't know. But if somebody has been jabbed and they want to get toxins out, there are a huge number of detoxification supplements that I have, and videos online explaining what to do. I interviewed a guy called Dr. Brian Ardis recently, and people have different opinions about Dr. Ardis, but he reckons that nicotine patches have been the most effective thing that he's seen. Yeah. But of course, why is nicotine so expensive and illegal? You know, the shamans have been using it forever, but they don't want you to actually have it. There are good things from almost all plants, really. Can I have a question from the back? I think I've left you out. If anybody got a question? No? Oh, yeah.
I was wondering, have you ever heard of a gentleman called Dr. Tullio Simoncini?
I have. Okay. I worked with a doctor about 20 years ago, an incredible guy, and he was looking after a patient with cancer, and he got Dr. Tullio Simoncini to come over to England and treat him with bicarbonate of soda. And bicarbonate of soda, as I mentioned earlier, is almost the most unheard of, incredible remedy for everything. It's just amazing. And don't confuse it with baking soda, by the way. You want pure bicarbonate of soda. And I sell the pure stuff on my website. I'm sorry to sound like an advert all the time. Another question? Yes. Yes. Yes, it can. Because any metal in you is now grounded to you. So from the machine's perspective, that's not an issue. Again, just to sound even more like an advert, if anybody's interested in these machines, I actually restore them and sell them as a hobby. So if you're interested in one of them, they're incredible. There's nothing else like it. I mean, written out of history. You know, every hospital used to have this technology, pretty much. Every big hospital, anyway. And then after the Second World War, they just canned the whole notion, everything. You know, Rockefeller medicine took over, drug surgery, radiation, and everything else had been forgotten. I mean, the main machine I use is from 1920s, so the technology was already 30 years old by the 1920s. You know, so by the 1930s, you know, were they even more forward? Well, only a little bit, because they'd really figured it out by about 1910, 1915. And one more question, possibly? Yes, at the back.
I wonder if you've been in contact with David Notes.
Yeah.
And got a little surname, and how they're doing, and how GCMap is.
Okay, well, GCMap is off the table. That's really gone. I saw Lynn and David a few months ago, and they were terrible. They weren't well. really, really, really suffering. And I was there for a couple of days with them, so I had time to say to them, what's going on, what's going on? And it turned out that, you know, all their property, everything had been stolen, so they'd still got a boat left, a small boat, and they were living on that. And I was trying to get to the bottom of what's wrong with you, what's wrong with you? And I said, is there black mold in the boat? They said, oh, it's full of black mold. And, you know, I don't think that was doing him any good. I mean, you know, one of the greatest heroes of the health world, you might say. Yeah, it was, hopefully they'll both recover, but they weren't looking good. Okay, so what can I tell you now? Let me just ask my wonderful assistant Vicky, have I forgotten anything? Oh yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about digestive enzymes for a minute. Once people get over about 50, they don't digest food the way they used to. So for some people, digestive enzymes are useful to take with each meal, and suddenly, you know, no bloating anymore, better digestion, better everything. Then, you know, in the digestive enzymes, there are loads of different ones for carbs, for proteins, and so on. But there's one separate one which we call prozyme, which is just for dissolving protein. Now, if somebody's got a problem eating meat or something, you know, they could take it with a meal. But if instead of that, if they took it separate from a meal completely, a couple of hours away, what happens is it will dissolve the protein that is you that you don't want. So what could that be? Well, things like fibroids, things like certain types of cancers, there are various build-ups of protein which actually we don't want. So if the prozymes, which are actually proteolytic enzymes, will dissolve scar tissue, will dissolve the bits of you that you don't need, and on the other hand, it actually counters inflammation as well. There's so much to talk about, so many things out there. But at the end of the day, let me answer the earlier question of how much of each to take. The crucial ones from my perspective are vitamin D in winter, and I take 10,000 IUs once, twice, 3 times, 4 times a week maybe. And I say that, I probably do it every day, but I don't, because I'm fallible. I take the vitamin C, I take the magnesium, fulvic minerals, selenium. I am using something at the moment called Panaceum, which is, I used to sell probiotics on my website, but now I've changed it to prebiotics. So the thing is, do you need extra probiotics from a cow or fermented vegetables or wherever, or would you really like to get back to life your existing healthy bacteria? So I'm taking this product, which I sell called Panaceum, which are oligosaccharides, which are basically types of sugar which the bacteria in your gut, which essentially is your immune system, thrives on. So I think that's another quite important thing to consider. It's not that probiotics don't do wonderful things, but we're meant to have a decent balance of our own friendly bacteria, friendly microbiome. But of course, anybody who's taken the drug ever, you know, pharmaceutical type drug, particularly antibiotics, will have severely damaged that natural balance. So it's an interesting thing to consider, because we should be self-repairing. You know, we don't do we really need stuff from the outside? Well, we shouldn't really. We should get it from the food and eat it. But that's probably the most I do, except that I keep experimenting with stuff, because I'm trying out new stuff all the time. I think it's quite difficult to work out what's doing what. I could take another question if somebody's got one.
Do you recommend fasting?
Yes. The question was, do I recommend fasting? And, you know, if you have got more weight than you need, then it's probably safe for people to fast. I had somebody recently who told me they were on day 14 of a fast. And he said, you know, funny thing is, I've still been shitting, I'm still shitting every day for the first 8 days. And I suggested that that probably means he's backed up for 8 days. Do I like to fast? I did it for about 3 weeks. And did I feel better? No. I was really hoping I would. I did enemas and all sorts, but didn't feel any different. But some people have miracles with fasting. I mean, allegedly Dave, if you've heard of him, he fasted for 28 days, recycling his own urine, didn't drink or eat anything. And he apparently was like a physical god halfway through it, let alone at the end of it. So yeah, have I got the willpower to do it again? I don't know. But intermittent fasting is all the rage, so they say. Is that what you're doing?
At the minute, yeah.
And you're feeling benefits from it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I was there from the gym and that, so yeah.
Good, good. I mean, yeah, the chances are we're all eating too much. I mean, you know, I've got more weight on me than I'd really like to have. I'm cursed with the blessing of knowing how to cook. So I can tell you a quick joke that I rather like. It's on my way out, I told my wife that she should embrace her mistakes, so she gave me a hug. It's all right, ladies, I'm not married, it's okay. Okay, yeah.
I heard something about borax.
Oh, good one, yes.
Can you tell us more what you know about that?
Yep. Okay, borax is another one that I do occasionally. Borax is great for building up yourself as a man or a woman. I mean, testosterone, it's a good precursor for testosterone. It first came to my attention as a reversal for arthritis. A guy called Rex Newnham, he was a soil biologist and he moved to Australia and got arthritis and he couldn't figure it out, what had changed. And as a soil biologist, he immediately suspected the soil. So he did a soil analysis and found there was very little boron in the soil. So he studied more, and the country with the lowest boron of all was Jamaica, and arthritis is really common there. And the country that had the most boron in the soil was Israel, where basically arthritis is almost unknown. And so boron comes from borax. Borax is mined. It's just a naturally occurring supplement. And it's incredibly inexpensive. You know, a kilo of pure borax costs you 10 quid or something, so they banned it. Because people were discovering, you know, it's curing people. Wouldn't want that. That would be terrible. So watch out, because there is borax substitute around. You don't want that. But you can buy borax from America. They haven't banned it there. There's a famous brand called 20 Mule brand. So it took 20 mules to drag the borax out of the mine. And you don't need much. It neutralizes fluoride. So if you're bathing in fluoridated water, you can put a couple of teaspoonfuls of borax in the water, neutralize it, just in the same way that vitamin C neutralizes chlorine in the bath, for example. So borax is super interesting. You know, all of the stuff, loads of the stuff that I've mentioned is banned. You know, MMS is banned, loads of things are banned. So you know they're good when they're banned, generally. So yeah.
Harry Rhodes has it.
Sorry, can you say it again?
Harry Rhodes, he's one of the
Arthritis.
speakers here. He's doing a talk tomorrow. Yes, he does a talk on just hydrogen water. It's just borax.
Oh, good.
So you can get it from, and ethylene blue he's got there. Yeah, ethylene blue as well.
Very good. Okay, yeah, gentlemen.
Ivermectin, any good for parasites?
Well, it's one of the really famous ones, and supposedly incredibly safe. So, you know, I tend to choose the pharmaceuticals last, but there are pharmaceuticals that are surprisingly safe, and ivermectin appears to be one of them. Yes?
Chelation therapy.
Yeah. Okay, so chelation therapy is about removing heavy metals from the brain, and again on my website we sell quite a few things that work as chelators. You know, there are all sorts of different ones out there. Depends what heavy toxic metals you want to get out, really, but I can't tell you too much about that one right now. So I'm going to wind it up in a minute. If there's anybody else with a question. Yes, lady there.
What about diatomaceous earth?
Ah, yes, I can tell you a good story about diatomaceous earth as well. The very first time actually, let me rephrase, let me start again. Diatomaceous earth made from diatoms. They're on the south coast of Britain, where there were these tiny little microscopic creatures, and as they got ground up, diatomaceous earth is very sharp, and so if you have got parasites, the tiny little sharp bits of diatomaceous earth are supposed to rip the parasites to shreds. So it's an interesting way to go. Loads of people like diatomaceous earth, and it's good for all sorts of other things as well. I mean, it is a brilliant supplement. But what it reminded me of is bentonite clay. Some 20 years ago, I'd heard about bentonite clay being mixed with loads and loads of water and psyllium husks as a bowel clearance. So the first person I ever suggested should do it after trying it out myself was this lady, and she was 28 years old. Next morning, she rings me up and says, "You never guess what came out after the diatomaceous earth." She said what looked like a chunk of gristle from a Sunday lunch, but she'd been vegetarian for 25 years, so it wasn't that. Don't know what that was. And she said a small piece of yellow Lego. And I mean, presumably that had been stuck there for at least 25 years, because she didn't remember swallowing one in the last 25 years. So, yeah, the benefits of a good detox, eh? All right, well, I'm going to finish up. Thank you very, very much for your patience. And,